Drake.
Yes.
Hey, Drake. I'm so sorry that I hung up on you.
That's all right.
I'm even more sorry after the conversation I just had.
It's okay.
So what was your question?
Okay. Well, I want to start off saying that, Matt, I believe your position on atheism is very true and it's justified. And I do agree with you on the idea that humans can't assess what is right and what is wrong without including God.
Okay. Thanks.
But I disagree with you on the idea that morality is based only on well-being.
Okay. Let me ask a quick question. Do you agree with my assessments and structure about well-being? Not whether or not morality should be about well-being, but, for example, if we threw the morality word out and I was only talking about well-being, are you fine with the structure and everything that I've talked about?
Yes.
Why is it that you think morality should be about something other than what I'm talking about as well-being?
Okay, I believe that so something can be wrong and not involve well-being.
Okay, like what?
And
Question.
what about incest whenever well-being is not negatively affected?
Okay, so first of all, what makes you think incest is wrong and why?
I believe that the consensus is that it's generally accepted as being wrong.
Well, no, but he's asking why you believe it. It's wrong.
We've already dealt with argument ad populum enough for today. I don't care what the consensus is. I want to know what's your justification. And we should probably define incest as well. Is it merely sex between close kin? And how close is too close?
It could be that, and it could be as far as looking at your kin in a sexual way without even saying anything, you know?
So it would be wrong to lust after someone who is kin to you?
Right.
How close of a kin? And why? Why? Well, go ahead. You can answer that one.
Like, what do you call that? Like family that's close, like siblings, father, mother, offspring.
Sure. So
He said immediate family.
okay. So am I okay with second cousins or first cousins or?
Sure.
Why?
Well, no, not okay with it. I thought you was asking like it's okay and.
Okay.
Wait, I have a
that would be
question.
wrong.
Well-
I have a sideline question. What if I am given up for adoption,
I was getting there.
and later I meet my brother, and we develop romantic feelings for each other, but we weren't reared together? Would that be a problem in your mind?
But they would know that they're brother and sister?
Yeah, I meet him, but I've just now met him. I've never seen him. So to me, he was a stranger, except that I know before I meet him, like we've hooked up on Ancestry, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you're my long lost brother, and I would love to meet you. And then I meet him, and we're talking, and we're spending all this time together, and discussing family and the weird things we have in common, and blah blah blah. And then after a while, I start realizing I really like this guy.
It would be wrong.
Why?
It's disgusting in its own way.
Yeah.
Whoa!
So
The argument from Ick.
I think here's the thing, Drake. Having spent a great deal of time talking about and thinking about and studying the how and why we go about making moral decisions, I've addressed this issue of incest many times. For the first thing that troubled me was the idea that whether or not they know about their relationship matters. I don't know what that has to do with anything, but the fact that you're willing to just justify it with ick while calling in to say that you don't think morality should be just about well-being means that you're saying morality should also be about the things that I personally define disgusting.
Right, in which case you could say that for people who find, homosexuality disgusting, that then suddenly that would make homosexuality immoral.
Mixed races,
Yeah,
people find that disgusting.
I don't think that's a fair argument.
So that doesn't seem to be a very good foundation for setting up a moral framework.
Well, the consensus is that it's wrong, though.
Okay, the consensus a while ago was
Well,
that
but
blacks and whites shouldn't
wait a
marry.
minute. The cultural consensus is that it's wrong. There have been some cultures where there were situations where it was encouraged, right? Where you had brothers
Like
and
the royal
sisters,
family and-
that were married off to each other. And even in the U.S. history, we had the idea of cousins getting married, and that was a way to keep money in the family. So, I mean, you're talking about defining morality through cultural consensus, which changes anywhere you are, any time you are. It just changes.
Okay. Well, I believe I have a second example.
Well, if you can't justify the first example, but go ahead. What's the second example?
Lying with bad intentions whenever well-being isn't affected.
How is it that you could lie with bad intentions and not affect well-being? And why?
Well, I want to hear the example.
I want to know why the intentions matter, first of all. But go ahead. Can you give like a scenario?
I want the example.
I want a scenario. Yeah, the example of what you're talking
about. Intending to kill somebody and then the plan just not work. I don't know. No, I'm sorry.
You don't think that would? Okay, but that's.
I'm sorry. Just intending, like lying to somebody and tell them that they're gonna get $1 million.
And you don't think that?
I can't think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't think of anything either.
I'm having a hard time thinking of anything, which is why we asked the question at the beginning.
I'm sure it exists, though.
Well, you find an
I'm sure the argument from I'm sure it must be.
Find a good example. Find a good example of something that you think should be immoral that doesn't affect well-being, and call us back.
Fair enough.
Well, what about doing anything with bad intentions?
What difference is?
But what? I mean, when I almost followed you with the murder example, right? Like where I do like an attempted murder versus a murder. Obviously, an attempted murder could be thwarted and no harm is done. And so what you do when you're putting that person away is you're basically saying they are a future threat because they're willing to kill people.
They are a substantial, clear and present risk to our well-being.
So you can't just let it go. But I do understand a little bit, at least. But I still think the idea that you are trying to kill people, whether you succeed or not, yes, I would call that immoral. And even if the full consequence of it doesn't get carried out, because you are very much attempting to do harm to people, which I think gets back to what Matt was describing, which is you are proactively intending and going and taking steps to try and undermine the well-being of a thinking creature would go against Matt's framework of morality.
So can you find an example of something that you think should be immoral that doesn't affect well-being? And if in fact it's just based on what you find icky, don't bother calling back. We need something better than what you're personally troubled by, or even what the consensus is troubled by. We need a foundation that isn't tied to subjective opinions, which is why I talk about it in terms of well-being, as does Sam Harris. I'm not citing him as an authority. I'm just referencing that I talked about it for years under something that equates to well-being. Sam used the well-being language, and I adopted that and went with it because it meant the same thing.
Yeah. One thing I will get into, not necessarily with this particular call. Are we still on the call? Or are we?
You there, Drake?
I mean, I know Drake is still there. I just didn't know if we still had things to discuss.
No, I'm done. If you're
I'm done. I was going to add something that doesn't really involve
Come up with
Drake.
an example, and you can also, by the way, email tv@atheist-community.org.
One thing that I bring up a lot that I haven't brought up on either of these calls, I've been hanging back, but the idea of research into morality in other social species. So there's actual researchers in animal, animal psychology who do research into checking to see what types of moral metrics exist in other social creatures. You cannot do this without metrics. You have to have, delineated areas where this is considered a moral thing, this is considered an immoral thing, this is considered an amoral thing. And so it's always interesting to me when people start foundering for trying to figure out the metric and the line and where's the basket. And it's like, there's actual research into this. Like you can go and look and see where that basket rim is. When I'm asking a person where they think that basket rim is, I'm not trying to trip them up. I'm just trying to see literally what are they calling morality, because I have my own rim of that basket, and it has a lot to do with what research has already defined as being the edge of that basket.
We can rely on that research too, because your foundation for the rim of your basket could be fairness. And then we can drill down to what you mean by fairness.
Right.
It could be whatever God says, and then we can drill down to whatever. Mine happens to be based on well-being. Nobody's saying that the boundaries aren't going to be fuzzy. As a matter of fact, most of us would point out that they're incredibly fuzzy, and that there are very difficult questions on the horizon related to identity and cloning and these other things. And if we can't get past the simple things, I don't know how we deal with those questions.
Well, that's the thing. People want to call up and they want to argue about particular moral questions. And it's like, how do you even start to address? It's like you've jumped 5 carts ahead. First, we have to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. Like, what do you mean when you say morality? Because if we don't mean the same thing, we're going to have 2 different discussions going on, and it's going to take forever to figure that out, and then we're going to end up right back at, well, what are you calling morality?
It's like the guy who called a couple weeks ago wanting to know what my position on bestiality was, or wanting to know the atheist position on bestiality.
Doggy.
Well played. But it was very clear that he wasn't actually interested in a conversation and hadn't thought about it. He wanted a soundbite. He wanted to get an atheist saying, I'm okay with bestiality, which I gave him.
Maybe he was looking for validation.
I gave him the soundbite that he was looking for, because my biggest issue is I don't know how you get informed, enthusiastic consent from a creature that can't communicate and doesn't have those concepts.
Right.
And so on those grounds, I'm opposed. However, that's why the incest thing is one of those things. Your example, you meet somebody, you know your brother and sister, and yet you can't fight this attraction. There is something, and scientists have researched it, and my wife can post on Facebook and tell you all about it, called near kin attraction, I think it is. And so let's say you didn't know, and now you start a romantic relationship and you find out.
Yeah, what
was immoral about it. There's ways to complicate these issues, and there's ways to drill down to figure out, here's what we should think and why. Here's our best estimate of what is and isn't harmful, what is and isn't in our best interest. And to just go, well, I find it icky, and most people in society find it icky. Well, I don't care what people find icky. That's, by the way, another argument ad populum. I care what people should find icky, if we're going to use icky as the,
And I do want to point out that, there are certainly complications that come in as far as, for example, power structures of families and things like that. So it's like I wouldn't simply say that, just because everyone consents, that's totally fine, because a person who is raised could be groomed by someone in a way that would make that completely unfair.
And we've had that conversation as well.
And so I just don't want to leave people with the impression that we're just basically saying, like, oh, any sort of incest is totally okay with me. I
wasn't saying anything remotely like
no,
that.
I know, but I'm just saying that a lot of people who might not have a history with the show, may not have heard these discussions before, may not understand that, yes, we understand that there are the same objections in a family structure as there would be in any other social structure where there's a power imbalance. So I'm not.
The grooming issue is the big one. Outside of the grooming issue, so one of the things when we talk about consent. We talked about informed, enthusiastic consent. That's the key right there. And one aspect of informed, it should be properly informed. That means that you weren't actually groomed to think that you were informed and then give consent. Barring that, it doesn't seem to be any of my business. If 2 consenting adults who happen to be related, I don't care in what way they're related, if they are truly both informed, consenting adults, I don't know what justification you have for thinking it's wrong, other than the ick factor. Now, there may in fact be a justification. Some people will go down the road of, well, you've got genetic issues that crop up in breeding, but that's actually not that true.
Well, but I mean, it wouldn't fly anyway because we don't hold people to account. So, for example, if two people are carrying a genetic trait that they know puts their children at risk, we do not hold them as immoral generally if they decide to have children, even if they had like 9 out of 10 children who died from a defect that they knew that they had a high potential to pass on.
And it's because we fall back to a foundation of individual liberty and individual sovereignty.
If they're not related, we would never hold that over their head.
Yeah.
And so it's like the idea that, well, you're related and it puts these children at risk. Well, you could be unrelated and both have a genetic, be genetic contributors that could cause problems with your children. Be completely aware of that, and most people would say it's still your right to try to have children.